So we've kind of been hanging out right in this one area right here for a while. Google Cloud Storage. So I've really cleaned these up quite a bit, and I finished that README file. So if you have any questions about the ACLs or getting files, putting files, the delimiter versus the prefix, right? Like that's all really beautiful in there right now, and nice code. Like it's funny how going through your code, it's kind of like, well, that doesn't need to be there, and I could do this a little bit more effectively right there. So I've been through that code several times. Of course, if you see anything that could be cleaned up, then please do so. Point it out to me or do a pull request or whatever. I have a little bit of a cold, so. The one thing which is still mystifying me, and I got $20 for whoever could solve it won, or anybody else. I've already given it to these guys, if any of them, first person to solve it. But is when you set the permissions to a Gmail account, just being able to show that. Like nobody's done that yet. So last night in the middle of the night, it kind of came to me, maybe I have to set permissions to restrict it to everybody. Restrict so nobody can get into it, but then just give permission to this one person. But if anybody could get that working, I got $20 for you because I want to see it. And we've already seen the photo blog, and then I said, okay, I'm going to get this JavaScript stuff all cleaned up for you. Because if you do web dev, you have to know some basic JavaScript. You don't have to know everything. And I've already shown you guys the joke, the essential JavaScript versus the good parts, right? How many people have not seen that joke? I don't think I showed you. JavaScript, the good parts. Oh yeah, dude, that's funny. Let's watch that. So here's basically, a really nice perspective on JavaScript. JavaScript, the definitive guide. JavaScript, the good parts.
Sad part is that's probably true, actually.
So it's super popular language, super essential, necessary, very useful, but also kind of wonky, and it gets just like wacky functional programming with callbacks and anonymous functions and ifs, right, which are just self-executing functions, right? The code sometimes is like, what the hell is going on there? And isn't there a clearer way to sort of write that? So this is a language that's created by one guy in 11 days and then just built upon. And there's a funny video Daniel's just pointing out to me, reminding me, what? So we're just looking for it here. I'm looking for it. All right, I'm going to turn my recording off so we'll find it. All right, so the talk can be found right at that URL. If you're watching this video, you want to check it out. And it starts at like 1 minute, 30 seconds or something, the JavaScript part. Okay, I got to keep that somehow. Put it over there. Create a bookmark. So there's a little JavaScript to go comparison. So you can just kind of see some of the essentials. And this was done by Caleb Doxey at our summer boot camp. And I'm not going to go through it. You could go through it on your own time. But you could sort of see, how do you do something in JavaScript versus how do you do something in Go. Var myfunc equals function. Var myfunc equals func, right? Semicolons, no semicolons. Function myfunc, func myfunc, right? So some pretty, similarities, right? Some nice similarities, but then obviously some big differences too. So you can check that out on your own time. And then I went through MDN, has a really nice tutorial. And if you just like, well, here I've got the source. Because there's like 2 places on MDM, so I'm just giving you resources. And this one, learning web development, is one area where they talk about JavaScript. So this is like one page talking about JavaScript in relationship to learning web development, and so JavaScript basics, right? But then additional other links in here. And so I took all that code and I just wanted to have it available for you and runnable. And so the basics of JavaScript, right? Variables, data types, comments, operators, conditionals, functions, events, more resources, which will take you to right? Web technology for developers, JavaScript, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I think that might be the same page I was just at. And yeah, a lot of resources on there. So that's the tutorial, and then here's the. We did 10 days with Ray Villalobos.
I thought it was 3 weeks ago too.
Oh, 15, yes, thank you. I was looking at the numbers and I thought 10. And he's a lynda.com author and a nice, super nice guy. And he has like 4 billion children. He's populated half the earth. Seriously, like his family came out for vacation and it's like, whoa, you got a big family. There's like 8 kids, if not more. And so this is all code that we put together, and you only see 9 out here. So these were the first 8 days, and this is like day 10 or 11. But the last week we did was like all Firebase and Angular and Gulp and things like that. So I took all that out and I just left in the JavaScript. But there's some cool things in here, and so the things that I think were cool, I just kind of put show next to them. Right, because I thought, well, I could show that in class, and that's a kind of cool little thing to show. And so there's like font awesome for different icons, and all this stuff right here. There's the console in Chrome, and so you could open the console when you run JavaScript. You could say log console, and it goes to the console, and so console log right there, right? It's going to the console. Need a semicolon. Need a semicolon.
Semicolons are optional in JavaScript, but there can be occasional weird bugs where it doesn't detect it needs a semicolon where it does. So it's recommended that you put the semicolons in.
I didn't put all these in the other day. I went through all this code.
So use them. Probably a good idea because the occasional bugs where it misses that there's supposed to be a line that the statement is supposed to be ending are very annoying to try to debug.
So like this one here, if we look at what the JS is doing, we've already talked about JS some and building elements and things like that. Here we have an array, and then we're just creating a string here, nav, and ul is the first item, and then plus equals a new line, and then li, and we add that, and then we add nav plus equal anchor tag, and then concatenate it with links and the whatever the I is in the iteration, right? So this would be www.google.com. Then we increment our I, and then get the next thing, which would be Google, and then we add that to our string, and then we console log that entire string, and we get this. I'm looking at the wrong file. Right, so we built all that with JavaScript. So starting to build DOM with JS. Let me just quickly show you some of these. Create elements. You can see there's nothing here, just body. So it created all the HTML and then appended it to the document. And the code for doing that. We have an object. Pretty straightforward object. And then just select the body element, create a new h1 element, and then append to the body the new h1, and the new h1, the inner HTML, that's going to be my paragraph, which is that string, kind of like we did in the previous one, put together a string. So you can log an object, This is kind of interesting. You come down here when you do so here's my object, social, goes to there. I've got title, series, another object, otras, an array, right? And then going through otras and console logging Facebook, wFacebook, Google, wGoogle, Facebook, wFacebook, Google, wGoogle, and then saying, hey, just give me that, social sites, Facebook, social sites, Facebook, right? Or social sites, Google, and then log the entire object, console log the entire object, gives me social, that entire object right there. And so I could go into this entire object and start, this is just kind of useful and interesting, start looking through, you know, the different things which are in here. Bump, bump. And so if you do a console log or console dir, prints different things. So console log will give us like this. There. Console dir will give us this, where we could come in and we could start seeing, I don't know, like come down here and look at style. And so here's stuff related to CSS. And so we can start looking at all the CSS related to this one object in the DOM. The color.
So log is supposed to be a printable representation, like easily readable, whereas dir is supposed to be give you like all the details about it, like a programmer would need to see like everything about it, so they can try debugging it or something.
Without a doubt, both are your best friend when you don't know what's wrong.
Yes.
I left a lot of semicolons out. So this one's just kind of illustrating query selector. So selecting an element in the DOM. And there's also query selector all, which is the next one. And then appending childs and adding an event listener. And container event listener. I wonder what the event listener one does, because those are usually kind of interesting. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So JavaScript is enticing because it's like, that's a whole lot of functionality pretty easily, you know? And so I could tell what I clicked. I could capture that with JavaScript, clicking different links. And then that's an alert. And then show random images. I don't know if this is working because I don't have any images in that directory. Cool, it is. So it's just randomly choosing images.
It's probably grabbing them from the Lipsum website.
So you can see the images are changing, reordering. It's a small list, so but the main thing is they're becoming different orders, right? It's kind of cool.
So, quick question. You're just showing us what each of these things are doing. You aren't exactly telling us to get the code first time through.
Well, I think it's such a big subject that I just want to give you the resources and then a couple of challenges. And so you guys will, homework assignments, so you guys will dig through the code. And I think it's fairly straightforward and readable. I might be wrong, in which case bring your questions back.
Perhaps we can do some in-class things.
I was thinking today we will do something. We're going to build one of the challenges just in class. So I just kind of want to give you a tour, and then we'll go through and we could talk about each of the ones. But I just want to show you what's out there in the code, what it does. I don't think I could ask this question because my resolution's not big enough. The images.
Oh gosh.
What is happiness? Let me refresh. Oh, I could do this, can I? There we go. Something here. Enter your question. Who has a question? should I?
Are we going to learn JavaScript really well?
Are we going to learn be JS experts at the end of class? Very doubtful. Is parking? Will I easily find a parking place tomorrow? Without a doubt. Are you going to create? You're going to make pancakes. Outlook not so good. Pretty sweet. But not that hard with HTML and CSS and JavaScript once you kind of get how those all three work together. So just different images here. And there's a nice fade. Do you like our transitions? Good to use. You may rely on it. Right, so it's got a little bit of a transition there, and so it just transitions between different images, randomly picks one of the images and transitions, gives you the answer, you know. So those are just all different 8 balls with different images. And you can see all those 8 balls right there. And sometimes this is nice for when you're developing, just to see where are my objects on the page and how do I get them to do what I want. You just put a border around everything.
So the style tag is basically what you put CSS in. So normally you'd style to an external CSS file, but here it's a simple example, so it's all just in the one file. So just inside the style tag, and then CSS is a description for how things look. Your HTML is what's on your page. Your CSS is how it looks, and the JavaScript is what it does. So CSS is where HTML is assigned with tags for what's there. CSS is a combination of selectors and properties. So the various selectors are like, here's a body selector. It just takes the body tag from the HTML, which is further down, and these are the properties that are applied to it. So asterisk is the global selector, just selects everything.
Yeah.
So
if I turn that on, and the important, by the way, is like overwrite everything.
Mm-hmm.
If there's anything else.
CSS normally, things that appear later will overwrite things earlier. So important breaks that particular rule. So by saying border 1 pixel white important, you're saying everything, every element on the entire page now has a 1 pixel border around it, even if they've got another border tag inside themselves later on. The important will override it.
Yeah, you can actually kind of see the borders overlapping
Uh-huh.
in the middle on the sides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
if there's like a nest, like a couple invisible items like nested in each other for various reasons.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you're developing the layout of your page, just adding a border to that global selector is a very good way to kind of see where everything actually thinks it actually is, even the invisible things.
This is cool. I'm joking about the clapping. Goes on so.
So you may notice the flickering. That's because it has to go and load the image real fast before actually doing the transition. So it flips to the new image. It's loading the image. It finishes loading the image. Then it starts the transition up because it's got the 2 images to transition between.
Oh, I gotta have that
So there
preloader hack or whatever.
So yeah, if you're doing stuff like this with transitions, it's a good idea to create an invisible image tag that's like not visible in any way. That's got the next image. That way it'll load it. It'll be in memory, and then you set it to the actually visible part, and it'll transition smoothly because it's already got it loaded in the invisible tag.
Oddly enough, it wasn't flickering when I ran it over the weekend.
So if it's already loaded or something, like from previous transition in, then you won't have any flickering because it's already loaded. It's in the browser's cache.
File. Open recent.
So there are some JavaScript utilities for that. But yeah, if you're going to have transitions in the background, it's good to preload the images ahead of time so you don't have the flickery.
Da, 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 da. That's not the one I want. I'm going to get the piece of code to show that. There we go, that's it.
Looking for where I think my 8-ball had it.
Whack-a-mole, closure chaining, modular join, array printer, zombie timer, objects, func, day, 8-ball.
Yeah, if you want to see an example, you can look up my 8-ball and get.
Okay, I thought it was here. Let me just finish seeing if it's here. Choose a message, get references. That's it. It's not there. All right, where's your 8-ball?
It's on my GitHub. Repositories, forwarders at github.io. That one. Up, down. There it is. Summer Web Bootcamp. So what was it, week 2 or 3? You can search, yeah, 8-ball. Or there's my changing background. It's also got it. There it is, that function.
All right, so I haven't thought about this code, so. Well, line numbers, those won't be helpful.
Yeah. So images would just be an array, an empty array that you create. And then backgrounds is your list of backgrounds. So all this will do is it loops through your list of backgrounds. For each one, it adds to the array images a new image and sets that image's source to whatever your background is. So it'll load it, but you're not adding the image into the DOM, so it's just kind of invisibly there. Out in the middle of, it's not actually in the DOM, so no one can see it, but it's been loaded in the background, and so the image is already loaded. When you change your visible image to one of those images, it's already loaded. It doesn't have to have the flickery because it says, "Oh, I've already got it loaded." Just transition.
I'll figure that out later.
So you could say it's almost similar to how back in the old days of movies, the movie theaters would have someone who would swap out the film canisters while the film was playing.
Yeah, kind of. With like ahead of time with the second projector, kind of, yes. Except usually computers are good enough nowadays, you can just do all of them like that. And it's not too often that you're going to transition between images, but when you do want to, it's a good idea to just to preload it into an image tag that's not actually attached to anything.
What do you want?
That's what you don't want.
What do you don't want? I want fruit. I want berries. I want ice cream. Or froyo. I want cupcakes.
So you can do a lot with JavaScript. Things to keep in mind, though, is JavaScript is slow. If it's possible to do it without JavaScript, I think we mentioned this before, it's probably a good idea to do it without the JavaScript.
It's just an interval timer. Glad we see eye to eye on that.
So Html5 and Css3, well, Css3 especially, added a whole lot of new properties that you can attach to stuff, including things like the transition. And so you can do a whole lot without the JavaScript, even being necessary. So transitions especially, that was the thing that a lot of people wanted for a long time. You'd had to use JavaScript to get it to work in any way. And eventually, when they added them to CSS3, it was mean, there's a lot of websites that don't know about it. You saw the big thick differences between the JavaScript, the good parts in JavaScript, the definitive guide. So a lot of people are just using JavaScript for it because that's what they're used to. But with CSS3, you can do the transitions without that. And CSS is running with your browser instead of through an interpreted code. Your browser's written in C or some other equivalent language, so it's going to be much faster. And then, yeah, JavaScript itself, by itself, is really fast compared to all these other variants. jQuery is really popular, but look how much slower it is compared to just plain old JavaScript. I mean, yeah, that's smaller, but is it worth the difference in speed?
Then you got to learn a whole new language. And then
Yeah,
that language is abstracted from JavaScript. So if you have to do something in JavaScript, that's not where you spent your time. And so you don't have the same familiarity with it. And you got to download an entire library, which makes your page load slower. So I really am an advocate for
jQuery is
fundamentals.
almost worth it to get to learn just because it's so popular still, because not everyone knows the HTML5 JavaScript commands that can replace most of its functionality.
So this is a once you start the timer, you can't stop it, like that TV show Lost. It's like you just have to keep resetting the button. What happens if you don't push it? You are free, actually. However, certain terms and conditions apply.
And the low resolution is messing it up.
Yeah. Messed up my layout.
So you can see from some of these, it's a good idea to test your, to resize your browser a whole bunch and see how your layout looks on a whole bunch of different size browser windows.
So you can see how, different things, array printer, object printer,
So lots of stuff in there.
functions. Not sure what that, I don't know if that's interesting or I thought that would just be good code to point out. It's just good code to point out. I like the visual stuff. Anonymous. JS sucks. I call this file JS sucks because it kind of gives you an idea why JavaScript sucks. So you create this object, and then you have another variable which is assigned to an anonymous self-executing function, and that returns an object that has fields, which are functions, and then my object down here, speak, right?
That's the anonymous stuff.
Yeah, it's just nuts.
So you can basically jury rig your way into classes or goes structs with methods with JavaScript with this, but it's like it's not pleasant to try.
Like you just gotta sit there and meditate on that code for a minute to even figure out what the hell's happening. Accepts objects. So this right here accepts objects, right? But it's not taking a parameter. You just
It's take yes.
Here pass
you are
in.
allowed to call.
because
a function,
argument
yeah.
0. There we go.
Any arguments that you pass in that are not in the
Right as a
argument list will
parameter.
go to the arguments array instead of giving you an error.
So that's why I was like, man, JavaScript sucks.
I'd rather just have the error and say, hey, you're doing bad programming practice, personally, but
So here's some more JS sucks. You can take a look at that. And then whack-a-mole, you've already seen it. Cancel. So this is a good illustration of like you could do something with JavaScript, but that's actually still just doing it with CSS. But this is like zebra striping. That's really bright. And you could also just, you don't even need any JS. You just do that right here with CSS. With that CSS. Figures out which LI and makes it one color or the other. Background color. This is kind of fun. Whoop, 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 whoop.
that would be a good candidate for transition, actually.
Yeah. Background image.
So you can see see, it's actually got all the images loaded, so they can show the little tiny version down below. So there's no flickering because it's already loaded. It just has to show the big version there.
I have to go back and figure that code out. If I don't click anything now, I get nothing. I need a default.
It does look like that there is some resizing going on, though.
Yeah, it's the CSS.
Yeah, the transition, when a transition effect changes from one image of a certain size to another size, it transitions the size difference too. But that's just the CSS. You can adjust how the transition works right there. Transition, background image, 1 second to ease. So background image just has the size adjustment as well. So if they change the background size to something static, then where the size never changes, then you wouldn't have that issue. Or if all the images are the same size. Or even the same ratio would work even.
It shows you how you can walk the DOM. So start node is our root HTML. And then we have walk the DOM, which takes in a node. And so then we do walk the DOM and start with HTML. And then we call it again recursively for all the children of the current one. So originally it's HTML, and then call it again for all the children. And so next node is current node, child nodes, and that's an array, and give me all the items of it and call those. So when you run this, it prints out information. Here's HTML, right? And then HTML child nodes has 3. Well, if we look at that node list, we got head, text, and body, and then we could actually drill into that and be like, what's text? Because HTML should just have head and body, and the text is a return, which is kind of interesting. So if I was to take this little space out right here, that return out, and then rerun this page, HTML only has 2, head and body. That little text thing is gone. Now it's back to 3. And so you could go through and look at each of the elements in the page. Kind of cool.
See, web pages are a lot more complex than you might have thought at first glance, huh?
It's a pretty big body of knowledge to wrap one's head around. So removing a child, and then dog ears, mouse over. Mouse over is kind of nice. So instead of a click, you could just mouse over the image. I'm not clicking, I'm just mousing over. I'm not sure what this mouse over is. Same thing though. Slightly different.
Shows an enlarged image of the image you have over.
Yeah. So. And then audio player. When we were creating that, everybody in the room was like getting noisy. It's kind of fun. So that's just with the audio element right here, audio, and you just give it a source, and you come down and set play or pause or whatever, and figure out the logic so it plays or pauses.
There are 3 elements that are responsible for the death of Flash: audio, video, and canvas. So audio element lets you play audio, any kind of sound, as opposed to having to go to Flash plugin to play sound. Same thing with video. It just plays any kind of video, standard MP4, whatever. And then canvas is basically a customizable element that you can draw whatever you want on. So which replaced Flash, like games and such.
What about iframe?
So iframe is just yeah, that one's a bit older. I think that's just looking at another web page inside your own web page.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're embedding a YouTube video or something, it's just showing the YouTube page inside your own page.
So this is a spinner, and you can come into the network tab and then do throttling and say, oh, let's see what this is like on 2G. That's what this website would be experienced like on 2G. What about
2G?
3G? Plenty of people probably in India.
I guess.
right? Percentage of the world 2G, 3G. So that's the spinner deal. The graphics are crappy on it. I'd figure that out if I was making that production, obviously. And then some form validation where it's like, did the person enter the right stuff? And so that's all right there. All right, so that's just a little bit of walkthrough of the examples in the code base. Glad to get those guys up there for you and running. And peruse it at your will. We're going to see the homework, and then we'll look at Ajax. And we'll do one homework example, some JavaScript, so you guys could ask some questions. So.